I'm really honored and pleased and flattered to have our speaker with us tonight. Nancy McDuff and I have known each other for a very long time, since her days at Tulane, long before she came to Athens, Georgia. And she is one who has always been very generous with her time for Darlington. She's always been willing to come here and speak. She's helped us with senior boot camps. She's spoken to senior classes and parents groups through the years, and just take it from me, she is one of the most respected voices in our profession. And I will give you a little of her biography, and that's the last you'll hear from me tonight. Nancy is the Associate Vice President for Admissions and Enrollment Management at the University of Georgia. She has served as the Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Georgia since 1995. Prior to that, she spent 17 years at Tulane University in their administration. She has a BBA from Loyola University and an MBA from Tulane. She has also attended the Institute for Educational Management at Harvard, and in 2009 was a Japan Fulbright Scholar. She's the former president of the National Chief Admissions Officers of Flagship Institutions Association. She's presented, she's published, she's spoken in many, many areas of enrollment management and admission. When not working, she enjoys traveling, cooking, and spending time with her 5 intelligent, good-looking, and well-behaved grandchildren. So please join me in welcoming Nancy McDuff.
Thank you, Sam. Okay, the well-behaved was a little slight exaggeration about the grandchildren. 4 of them are boys, and they're under 12, so they're a handful. Sam, I'm really honored to be here tonight. It's fun to be back on campus. It's the first time I've been in this lovely new building. But as I told you, as I arrived on campus and I drove through the gates, I remember just how beautiful Darlington is, and it's just a delight to be back here today. Parents, I hope I'm going to give you some information, perhaps reduce a little bit of the stress, maybe even be a little entertaining at times, try to help you a little bit with the college search process. I've got some tips for students, some tips for parents, so if you've got paper and pen handy, it may be worthwhile. You may want to refer to them. I'm going to talk a little bit for about 30 minutes tonight, then be able to take questions, and we'll see how many answers I actually have. I'm going to try and put the talk into about 3 parts. I'm going to start first with a little bit of general information about the college search process. I'll talk a little bit about what we do at UGA, trying to address some of the most often asked questions that we get. And then I'm going to pull out my crystal ball, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's happening in higher education, things that may affect you as your children or students as you're going through the admissions process or entering college in a few years. Let me start first with just a few general comments that I hope could guide some family dinner conversations. Parents, it's stressful, isn't it? You know, the whole thought about sending your child to college, making that hard decision. You end up wanting it to be just perfect, so you really go overboard. You end up doing a little bit too much sometimes. One too many applications, yes. Let me rest assured, you don't have to do this. There's no one best college for you. Don't be hoodwinked by U.S. News and World Report rankings or perhaps the gossip at the grocery store. Really, the best college match for a student, you may not know till 20 years down the road when you look back and say, you know, that was a good choice. And good enough sometimes is just right. There are a lot more mile markers in a student's life than just the college choice selection. They fall in love, they decide to have children, they decide to stay in a marriage, they find the perfect job. All things that perhaps are more important decisions than college. And that's an odd thing for me to be saying, but I firmly believe it. By the same token, I often hear parents tell their students, it's going to be the best 4 years of your life. Well, we hope it'll be 4 years and not 5 or 6. And it may be the best, but you know, by the time you get to be my age and you look back, there were better years. So don't hold that out there and set the expectations so high that no one can match them. And by the way, often that college decision about where to go to school, you may make more than one time. Every year when commencement rolls around at the University of Georgia, about 1/3 of the students who go across and get their baccalaureate degree started their education somewhere other than the University of Georgia. So they made that best decision more than once. So bear that in mind. You may be going on to graduate or professional school. You may be returning to college. You get a chance to make that best decision several times. Let me ask the parents in the room, for how many of you is this your first child going off to college, if you'd raise your hand? You know, you're preparing for the first, okay? Do we have any parents in here that this will be your last child going off to college? You see the difference between happiness and terror? Those folks are smiling. They're all right here, right in the middle. They're smiling. They're not, you know, white-knuckled to the chair. They're happy folks. You too will get to that point somewhere down the road. It's just tough to know it right now. Now, we've got a lot of students in the room too, so I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you are in the 7th grade? Raise your hand. Huh? Good for you. 8th grade? 9th grade? Do we have any high school students in here beyond 9th grade? 10th, 11th, 12th? Uh-huh. Well, you were paid to be here, right? That gives me an idea of who the audience is for me to talk to a little bit. And so let me first mention that the choice of college is not just going to be a high school senior's decision or just the parent's decision. It really is going to be a family decision. And you need to start talking to one another. You need to be planning for it, opening the lines of communication. In fact, one of my first tips is, as you're planning to go on summer vacation, I normally talk about this, you know, as you're entering perhaps the sophomore or junior year of high school, take that summer vacation. If you pass a college, spend a little time on the campus. May not be one you've ever heard of before, but you can get a freebie out of it. You can spend some time, see what's comfortable, what you like about it. You've got nearby colleges right here that you could probably go and sit in on an information and take a tour just so that you've done one, so that you feel comfortable and you get one under your belt. When you're a little nervous, I don't want to ask a question, but you can hear what other people ask and you can say, wow, that's important to me. So students, you need to keep a journal. We used to call them diaries when I was a kid. Now we call them journals. It could be on the computer, on your laptop. It can be a nice hand-bound moleskin book. But you need to start keeping notes of things. You're going to take trips. You're going to have jobs. You're going to be involved with activities. Start taking notes about stories, about things that interest you, about things you like and you don't like. Because when you get to be a senior, you're going to write a lot of essays. And you know what? Those journals are great for going back and looking through and going, oh, I've forgotten about that time I fell out of the boat in front of the girl I was trying to impress. It's a good story. Or I forgot about the time that I had a leadership role that scared me to death, but I did a good job. You'll have the notes, you'll have the reminders. Simple, doesn't have to be too much detail, but it's a good idea. By the way, that admissions decision about when you're looking at colleges, you've got to have buy-in from the whole family, because if you don't, if you forget that it's a family decision, I know sometimes the parents have in mind, well, I know where Susie's going to school because it's where I went to school or where I wanted to go to school and didn't get to school. But if Susie doesn't want to go there, she can make it a really bad decision. You know, that's what young people can do. They can make sure we know when we force them to do something they don't want to do. Well, there are long-term consequences of that. I've seen students dig academic holes they cannot get out of. So make sure that the whole family's talking and it's a family decision and a joint decision. You know, nowadays, students don't go to college. They join a college. They become a member of a community. And it's not unlike what you have here at Darlington. When you decide where you're going to school, it's not a business decision that's a 9-to-5 job. You become part of a community of scholars. You buy into a past and a future. You buy into this network of people that are going to be lifelong friends, that are going to open doors for you as alums when you're looking for jobs or moving into a community. Sometimes you meet that lifelong love interest right at college. So think of it as joining a community and seeing yourself as part of that community. And parents, I want to remind you that your child's probably not Mark Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs or Oprah Winfrey. These are all famous college dropouts. You're going to expect your child to go to school and graduate. You're going to expect your child to be a lifelong learner. Students, that first job you get out of college is really exciting, but you're probably going to change jobs 4 times in the first 10 years. You're going to change careers 3 times in the first 15 years. That means we have to teach you in college now for jobs that don't even exist. We have to make sure you have the knowledge to be successful when you change jobs and change careers. We don't know what the future jobs are going to be, so we have to teach you to be a lifelong learner because you will continue to learn for the rest of your life. There's a big push nowadays for retention in college and graduation from college. You hear the federal government talking about it. Funding at the University of Georgia, our state funding is going to be determined by improvement in retention and graduation rates, so it's a big issue for all of us. So don't just think about it as getting into college, think about it as getting through college. Parents, don't shortchange your child by saying, what are the shortcuts I can do to assure that they get admitted to Harvard? Because it's not getting admitted to Harvard that's going to matter. It's getting a degree from Harvard, it's getting through Harvard, it's getting the knowledge. So keep that in mind. Okay, parents, I've got a tip for you here. This isn't mine, this is from Arlene Cash, a good friend who used to be head of enrollment at Spelman. But I was on a panel with Arlene one time, and her son was a high school senior, and she mentioned that her son told her one morning that he had to go to court that afternoon. And she said, you have to go to court? And he said, yes, I got a ticket back 3 months ago, and I've got to go to court to get my... You got a ticket 3 months ago, and you never told me? He said, Mom, all you ever want to talk about is, did I get registered for the SAT? Have I filled out this form for college? Have I made my appointment for this meeting? He said, you don't want to talk to me about anything except college. So Arlene's suggestion, and I think it's great, is have a college-free zone in your house. It could be the breakfast table. It could be anywhere in the house from 3 to 5 on Sunday. But it's a time or a place where you agree you're not going to talk about college applications or college admission at all. That is the time you're going to talk about something other than that. She refers to it as a college-free zone, and I think it's a great idea. Keep that one in the back of your mind. So if you get into college, you have to pay for it, right? That's the tough part. My husband and I put 3 children through college. That's how we got 5 grandkids. And I can assure you that when the last one graduated college, it was like getting a huge raise. There was discretionary money I hadn't seen in so long. It's expensive. You've got to start planning for it now. And I'm just going to mention a couple of things about college cost and financial aid. There's a lot of confusion about what colleges cost. And so let me give you my tip. If you want to know what a school says they cost, go to their Office of Student Financial Aid or their financial aid website, and you will find a cost of attendance. Usually it'll be a little grid, and it'll talk about what a typical student needs to fund 9 months of going to school. And it'll include tuition and fees, which is what everyone focuses on, but it'll include, what's not surprising at a boarding school, room and board, books, personal expenses. And that bottom line will give you a reasonable estimate of what the university or college charges for a typical 9 months of attendance. Now, don't let sticker shock scare you off from applying, because you don't know what it's going to cost your child to go to school there. You won't know that until they apply and until you find out how badly that school wants your child. How much are they willing to discount that cost through perhaps a scholarship or a loan or work study? Perhaps you qualify, and my guess is many of you do, Hope or Zell Miller, which can reduce that substantially in the state of Georgia. Or you qualify for federal aid, which if it's a federal Pell Grant, a grant is like a scholarship, it doesn't have to be repaid. Or it may be what we call self-help, which could be a loan that you're going to pay back later. Perhaps the interest rate is subsidized so that it's low, or maybe the interest is paid while the student is in school. Or work study, where they have a job on campus and they get the money on a bi-weekly basis. So until you know all of that, you don't really know what it's going to cost you. You know what the starting point is, but you haven't been to Filene's basement yet to find out what the real cost is going to be for you. So bear that in mind. Another tip, and this is for the parents and the students, never, ever pay someone to help you find a scholarship. With the internet, there's absolutely no need for you to pay someone to find a scholarship because you can go and do your own searches. There are great websites out there, and my guess is that Sam Moss and Ivy can point them out to you. My favorite is FastWeb, F-A-S-T-W-E-B. FastWeb. And it's a site that you can throw in information about yourself and it will match you up using an algorithm with scholarships out there that you may qualify for. You have to fill in the application, see whether you're interested. Some of them are small, but I've talked with students who may come in with 12 scholarships that they found, small bits that added up and made a real difference. So don't ever pay someone for this. FastWeb is free and there are others that are free. In addition, the FAFSA, which is the free financial aid form, if you're looking at seeing if you could qualify for some of the federal aid, is also a free application. But there's FAFSA.gov and there's FAFSA.com. If you go to FAFSA.com, you can fill out that same form and pay $18. Go to .gov, it's free. There are many reasons why families will look at different ways of approaching education. I think that many families are now going to be looking very seriously at two-year colleges or community colleges to start off their education, especially if President Obama's plan goes through, where it could be free tuition at two-year schools. The state of Tennessee is going to the community colleges as tuition free. So families have to look at good financial decisions, and perhaps a student starts out closer to home where it's lower cost, or maybe they need a little bit more time to mature. And so starting off at a community college gives them that time. Things changed substantially in the state of Georgia in about 1992. And what we find at the University of Georgia is a lot of stories like this. So the excitement is not getting into the private selective colleges, excited getting into the low-cost state school. And of course, in Georgia in '92, tuition and fees were free at any of our state institutions. We found that the Hope Scholarship provided wonderful opportunities for students to find a low-cost way of getting a good education. For many of those students, they were going on to graduate and professional school, and if they could forego a large bill for the first 4 years of school, it allowed them then to go on and not have to take out a lot of loans to do their graduate professional school. But that's what we found all throughout the state of Georgia. Students, you need to start talking with your parents, and they need to start talking to you about making wise decisions. Wise decisions when you are living in a boarding environment is a good start for college. Many students come to college never having lived on their own, and suddenly they can make all their own decisions. And sometimes they don't make wise decisions. When you're 17 or 18, you assume you've got a bulletproof vest and you're safe from anything happening. We want you to be safe, but sometimes that means having to make good decisions. And it starts right now with social media. It's not private. There are admissions folks who actually check Facebook. If I read something in an application that makes me wonder, I may Google the student. It's not private. Be careful what you put out there. Some schools may be totally Facebooking everybody. We don't do that. It's got to be that there's a reason for us to do it, but it's there. And the first thing we notice about students is their email address. If you look, these are actual email addresses at the University of Georgia on applications. My favorite's not up there, it's Bama Bound. Now, if I'm reading the application and I see the email address, it's right there with the demographics, and it's Bama Bound, maybe you're not really interested in the University of Georgia, you know, and so maybe we won't issue it. So, good tip for the students, when you're getting ready to start this whole college search process, set up a free email account, a Gmail account. Use it for everything you've got to do with college. So if you're requesting information or contacting them about a tour or a visit or submitting your application, it's all using one email account. You're not getting it mixed up with your personal email account. And then you've got everything together. You check it regularly because people will contact you that way. And do something nice and professional. You know, don't be cutie booty on that, you know. Be nmcduff@gmail.com because it does say something about you. Legal implications can last a lifetime. If you've done something and it asks on your application, tell the admissions office about it. The worst thing is finding out afterwards that you didn't tell us. Most cases, that's grounds for immediate dismissal from the university, withdrawing an offer of admission. It's worse than whatever you did is to not tell us about it. So please be careful about that. It's some of the hardest stuff I have to do is withdrawing offers of admission. And sometimes it's not real major things, but it's that if we ask, you need to tell us about it. Parents feel comfortable. Most college campuses will have a world of resources right there to help your student. Everything from resident assistance in the dormitories to health services to tutoring. What the student has to do is have the maturity to know when they need help and go get it. Because guess what? With privacy, we don't contact the parents. Once a student goes to college, they're a young adult, and everything that they do is theirs. It's not the parents'. So you want to remember to have those talks with the students about making wise decisions, using the resources, and contacting you when they need something. But just remember, if you contact the university and say, well, has Nancy been going to class? We can't tell you that. You have to ask Nancy that question. Let me talk just a little bit about admissions at the University of Georgia. In that great cartoon with the parents so excited really describes what began happening in the early 90s at the University of Georgia. And I always have to ask, do I have any alums in the room? I'd be surprised if I didn't. Do I have any students that have a sibling who's gone to the University of Georgia? Yeah, okay. You probably have seen changes as times have gone on from when you went to school or when you had an older child go to school than what it is right now. So I want to talk just a little bit about what we mean when we talk about competitive admissions at the University of Georgia. When I went to college, most admissions decisions were made based on the pantyhose method of admissions. Now, the ladies in the room probably know what I'm talking about. If you take a package of pantyhose and you flip it over on the back, there's a grid, right? Weight and height. And you can do this and go, okay, I wear a size, that size. Well, admissions was not unlike that, only it was grades and test scores. And you could find your GPA and your test score, and you could pretty much know this group was getting in, this group wasn't, and this group was maybe a little gray, didn't know. And admissions at UGA was like that 20 years ago. And what happened is more and more students wanted to come to the University of Georgia. Certainly the Hope Scholarship gave them a financial incentive to remain in state. The Hope Scholarship also provided opportunities from people from around the state to have more mobility. Because if they had limited resources and Hope was going to pay tuition and fees, they could now afford to travel and live in a residence hall and live on a campus. The other thing is the number of 18-year-olds graduating high school in Georgia has continued to do this. And it will do this till 2023 is the latest projection, which means more students ready to go to college, more students wanting to remain in state. And in the mid-90s, we were getting 9,000 applications. This year, we got 22,300 applications. We're bigger than we were. We're about 25% bigger, but we're not percentage-wise that much bigger. So what we had to do was come up with a good way to make decisions. It used to be if you, and I hate to tell you this, parents, but it used to be if you could predict to do a C average, could get into Georgia, no problem. We are turning away kids who predict to do B. I mean, it's a different environment. And it's not as much that we made the decision we're going to be more selective. We had to be. It's an economics of supply and demand at the University of Georgia. So what we do first and foremost is we're going to look at the academic factors. We ask our faculty, what do you value most in students in the classroom? And they told us intellectual curiosity. They want the students who love to learn, who stretch themselves. And so we look not just at your grade point average, but the rigor of the courses you took to earn that grade point average. So all A's is great, but all A's with no rigor means you didn't stretch yourself. We want the students who love to learn and will stretch themselves. So we're looking at your grade point average, the rigor of the classes that you took, and we're looking at your assessment, your test scores, and we're going to break them down. So you may know what your composite or what your total is, but we're actually breaking it down because critical reading, math, and writing each individually predict success at Georgia, but at different levels. So we put in the grades and the test scores broken down, and we can predict your success at Georgia. We scale that by the rigor of curriculum, and that's first and foremost the first thing we're looking at with students. We can determine from that the students who are academically superior, those who aren't competitive, and those who are competitive. If you know folks who applied early action, our early action decisions are based upon the students who are academically superior. We defer the students who are competitive because we need to wait and see the whole pool of students. And then the students who were not competitive, that small group, we did deny. We're going to do that same thing in February. All the students who were deferred and completed more information part 2 and the teacher recommendation, all the students who chose to apply regular decision, we're going to take all of them, do the same analysis, and guess what? In February, we're going to admit those academically superior students. What you should get from this, what I've just told you, is it is not any easier to be admitted early action than regular. You'll find out in February if you have the same criteria as the student who found out on November the 14th. You find out earlier if you apply early action. So we're going to apply the same criteria, and then all those students who are competitive, and my guess is there'll be 7,000 to 8,000 of them, get holistic reviews. And that's what we're doing right now. We have admissions officers who are reading those files. We already know that academically they could do fine at Georgia. We just will not have room for all of them. So we are reviewing each of those files. 2 admissions counselors will review the files. If there's much difference in their review, it will go to a 3rd reader, and often that will be me or one of our senior associates. We take the most senior folks for the ones where we have a hard time coming to agreement. We will then, in late March, look through all the students that we've done this holistic review and that we just kind of ranked from the very best student to the bottom of that 7,000. And we will know how many offers of admission we can make to fill the class but not overfill it. And so we will make those offers. Everyone will hear at the end of March. At that point in time, we will go ahead and notify the students that we're not able to admit, either telling them they need to go on and make another plan. And then for some, we will offer a waiting list. If they want to wait around and find out if we have room for them, these are students we'd love to have. We just do not have room for everybody. And we won't know whether we have room till all those students we've admitted have paid their commitment deposit. It's not due till May 1. No incentive to do it any earlier than May 1. And they all do it on about the 29th or 30th. We get complaints every year from folks, why can't you tell us about the waiting list earlier? It's because we don't have the information till about the 2nd week in May. So we will offer the waiting list to those students, and then we will let them know as soon as we can, usually it is by about the 2nd or 3rd week in May, whether we will have room for them or not so that they can go on with their other plans. This demand that's driving the way we make admissions decisions is going to continue to grow because the state of Georgia is going to continue to grow for maybe 8 more years would be the guess based on the current demographics. that means it's going to be more competitive than ever to get into the University of Georgia. But the good news for you students is because Georgia is one of the few states, there's only about 6 that are continuing to grow in population. All the schools across the country come here to recruit you. You will have plenty of opportunities to meet with recruiters from schools from all over the country. Many of them have full-time staff in Atlanta. Some of them have more staff in Atlanta than I have in Atlanta because they're so anxious to recruit you. So there are going to be plenty of opportunities to look at schools. Take advantage of some of those great college fairs that you have nearby to look at schools and see what appeals to you. So this is how we feel in the Office of Admissions. Our applications were open for 127 days. Students could apply for admissions. There was early action that was due by October 15th, and then regular decision was due on by January 15th. Well, the afternoon of January 15th, we're sitting there looking at the numbers going, you know, we may not have more applications than we had last year. We may not have quite as many. Wonder why? We had so many prospects, it kind of surprised us. Well, we don't really, a little helpful hint, we don't really close it down at midnight on that night. We'll keep it open until maybe 10 o'clock the next morning, so in case you had problems and you need to talk to us about something technological. So we all went home. The next morning at 5:15, I get up and I'm checking my email, and my IT director at 11:27 has sent out an email, we have a problem. We have 2,000 people trying to submit their application right now. At 11:27 p.m. on the last day, 2,000 people trying to submit. Well, it broke the server. Our servers can handle huge volume, but when you get an application, it's so much data going in, it was bouncing people out and timing them out, doing all these wonderful things. As you say, that was a tech-free zone. That's what we felt like that night. So I had 2 people up all night long answering emails, trying to bring the anxiety level down. I don't know if you had anyone at Darlington in that group.
I think we did.
Mr. Moss says thinks that you did. So we arrived the next morning. I get there early, staff are getting there early because we know the phones are going to be bad. People are going to be anxious. We're getting ready to send out an email to 10,000 people saying, don't worry if you applied after midnight, it's a perfectly good application. And by the way, we're going to keep it open till 9 o'clock tonight, you know, just in case you had any problem. I'm sending an email to the president of the university, you know, so that they know what has happened in case they get a call, our PR director in case the media, you know, we're triaging right and left. It's 9:30, we've got everything under control. The electricity goes out in our building. You could hear people going, ah, throughout the entire building. When that goes out, the phones kind of worked, but we couldn't send phone calls to people. So I've got admissions officers answering the phone so that they could triage right away. Our building doors lock when the electricity goes off. So we've got people there doing nothing but opening the door and welcoming people. I've got people standing I've got 80 fifth graders, by the way, in the building for a program. I've got people standing at the restrooms with flashlights, because of course there's no window in the... It was just wild. For about an hour and a half, we didn't have electricity. A major transformer blew on campus. It was a real windy, rainy day, and it did something to the transformer, but it was kind of like, what else could go wrong? We beat our expectations on numbers, but I don't know why. We've never had that kind at the end. So this actually is a cartoon from about '94, but it's really how we felt this year. Let me give one more tip to the parents, and this is to the students too. Admissions is a student-driven process, which means it is the student's responsibility. It's not mom's responsibility to complete the application. It's not Mr. Moss's responsibility to make sure the transcript gets here. It's the student's responsibility to meet with Mr. Moss, to make sure that he has the information he needs to submit the application, and then to monitor it. Because we give you every resource you can want. We give you an online status check where you can tell what we have in hand. We send text messages to say things like, your application is not complete and the deadline is tomorrow. You may want to check your status check. But we want the students to own the process. And the reason why is because they're the ones coming to the University of Georgia. And if they don't have the maturity and the independence to go through the admissions process, we may not be a good match for them. So it's a good way to start off to make sure that your son or daughter is ready for college. Darlington students do very well at the University of Georgia. In a typical year, I looked back over about 10 years worth of data. On average, about 35 to 40 Darlington students will apply to the University of Georgia. Over this 10-year time period, about almost 60% of them will be admitted in a typical year. Our average admit rate is closer to 50. So your students are being admitted and they're doing very well at the University of Georgia. And we're pleased that they accept our offer of admission at about 50%. So about half of them will choose to enroll at Georgia, and we're very pleased about that. When we're looking at a holistic review, those competitive students, we are looking at things that our faculty say they want us to have to be a complete campus. Their activities, their leadership, their character. We're looking at maturity and independence, how well they write, what other people have to say about them. And we're trying to build a class of students that will make a good enrollment at the university. At any point in time, our president may have us change what we're doing because the college president is trying to manage so many different things, probably not unlike your head of school and you're managing a school where there's a lot of different demands. So yes, there may be a student who gets admitted because he plays the oboe. We have a large orchestra. We need oboe players. If anybody in here is musically inclined and you haven't picked an instrument yet, try the oboe. I can assure you, there are never enough oboe players in a high school senior class to meet all the needs on college campuses. And when we think about it being a student-driven process, I can tell you that our office loves to talk with students. When they call, when they email, we'd rather talk with them than the parents almost any day because we want to talk with the students who are applying. And if you're not careful, you know, it becomes the parent who's driving the process, not the student. And the end result at commencement could look something like this. If you can see mom and dad are carrying the son through the commencement line, sometimes I think we want this more than he does. Don't be in that position. Let me take just a couple of minutes to talk to you about what's changing in higher education. And I refer to this as getting out my crystal ball. And I'm Mr. Moss didn't tell you, but I'm retiring this summer. This is my farewell tour of visiting a few high schools, and Darlington's one of my favorites. I've been in higher education for 37 years at 2 different institutions and 20 at the University of Georgia. And some of it is, there's some real challenges out there. And students, especially those of you who are in 8th, 9th grade, these are things that are likely going to affect you when you start looking at colleges. First and foremost, the testing assessments are changing. Both the ACT and SAT are going through major revisions right now. They are going to be more college and career focused. They were designed as tests to help admissions officers figure out whether a student was ready for college. Now they're going to be assessing some other things. They're going to be looking at career readiness for those folks who aren't going right into college. Different test. They're becoming very curriculum-based, and the curriculum that they're going to be based on is the Common Core State Standards. My guess is you don't teach Common Core State Standards here, which means in a few years, if students getting ready for the assessment, they're going to have to be prepped for what that test is going to be. We actually at the University of Georgia have been a beta site to test the new SAT. Back in September, we had 276 of our new freshmen who had taken the old SAT, or the current SAT, take the brand new SAT so that we can build a crosswalk to say if they scored this before, what are they likely to score now? Because a lot of what we do is we use history to predict the future. Well, changing the test wipes out a lot of history. And I've had a chance to see some of the questions and the way they're asking things, and I think it's a very good assessment, but it's going to be different. And we have to start thinking about how to prep for that. As I mentioned, there's a big focus on graduating within 4 years. The work industry out there says we're not producing enough college graduates for the jobs. And so states all over, the federal government are saying, how can we produce more college graduates? Well, let's get students to finish in 4 years. Well, the average time to graduation at the University of Georgia is 4.2 years. I don't quite know how we do that, but it's 4.2. A lot of students stay one more semester. Sometimes that's because with the Hope Scholarship, the parent says, take a little bit smaller load, only take 12 hours, and make sure you maintain that B average because I want you to keep the Hope Scholarship, and we'll pay for that other semester, don't worry about it. Now, ask a 21, 22-year-old, do you want to graduate and go to work and get up at 8 o'clock every day, or would you like to stay one more semester at the University of Georgia and maybe we'll have a good football season? They stay around a little bit longer. But with a push to get students to graduate in 4 years, it means students have to come in very focused, what they want to study, what their major is going to be, and get through it in 4 years. Well, a third of the new students at the University of Georgia are undecided in their major. They all have a major by the end because we don't have a degree in undecided, but they start off just not certain. Well, we have 170 different academic majors. How many foreign languages do you teach here? Two? We teach 34. You know, we teach things that your students have never even thought about. How can they know about it when they arrive? So part of our general education curriculum is designed to give them that exposure, to encourage them to step out and try some new things. Well, if we've got to assure everybody graduates in 4 years, do we have to get them career-oriented as they come in? What happens if they want to study abroad, do an internship, do a co-op? They need flexibility in their timing. So I'm concerned about, you know, we could get students out with degrees in 4 years, but what we want are well-educated people in 4 years. Not degrees, but education and knowledge. So this is a concern of mine, and I'm not certain how this is going to play out, but policymakers are really focusing on something that I think may be missing the mark. There are some great new programs that schools are putting in place to try and help students connect with careers and to get focus earlier, and I'm excited about new advising opportunities at the University of Georgia, adding 25 additional advisors so that every freshman gets more time with advisors to help them focus and go through that transition. Some really good things happening with experiential learning as well as in the classroom. You know, we think of the traditional college experience as 4 years on a residential campus in which you are around people of similar age and you're encouraged to learn not only in the classroom but through co-curricular activities. We're changing the way we're teaching students. We have online classes. We don't have much in the way of online undergraduate degrees at Georgia, but online is a method of delivery. So our students have found they're doing our Washington semester and they need to complete X course in their major, they may be taking it online while they're in Washington. When they're home for the summer working or doing an internship, they may be taking an online class. We have flipped classrooms. We're using technology in the classroom. We have blended methods of teaching. So things are changing a bit in how we're bringing the knowledge to the students. We're also finding that there's a bigger push not only for a degree in 4 years, but to get students into college earlier. I bet all of you know students who are dual enrolling somewhere. That's a great opportunity for students, but it's not the right opportunity for every student. As colleges, we're being encouraged to accept more experiential learning, to encourage students to start college while they're maybe a junior in high school and take those courses and apply it towards their degree at the University of Georgia. And it means that we're changing a little bit the way we do things. 3-year degree programs are being encouraged. Well, if you've got to go year-round to do a 3-year, did you get some experience or build your resume during the summer? All things that are changing in higher education. And there's a real push for for transparency in how we do admissions processes. For many years, the federal government defended the right of universities to decide what they were going to teach, who was going to teach it, and to whom they were going to teach it. There's a lot more regulations on what can be used in the admissions process. And one of the things I think of is that the admissions process is part art and part science. So the science is kind of all the formula, and then the art is that miracle that occurs. That's what happens when we holistically read. Those are miracles. But people would like to get rid of that miracle piece, make sure it's all transparent. But don't forget that my child was president of the student body and captain of the football team, and that, well, now wait a minute. If I take away some of that art to it and it goes all back to science, it's not quite the same thing. We're seeing some lawsuits have just been filed against Chapel Hill and Harvard that may change things. In my early years at Georgia, I said, I wonder if we could we have the lottery that's paying for education. Maybe we should just use the lottery to decide who gets into the University of Georgia. So I do my little academic magic, and I've got my superior students and I've got my non-competitive, and I take everybody's competitive and a random number generator, and I choose every 10th student. Who knows? It may go that way. And a final point I want to talk about is the rising cost of education. Debt has become a four-letter word. It's debt for families as they're sending their children to college. It's also debts of the universities and colleges as they're building buildings and trying to maintain their infrastructure. As costs rise, what you're getting in financial aid, the return on that investment reduces. So in the past, when I came to Georgia, the Hope Scholarship covered all tuition and fees. If a student had high financial need and they qualified for a Pell Grant, between the Hope and the Pell Grant, they basically had everything covered going to college. Those things today would cover about a third of the cost. So aid, what used to be, when I went to school, would cover a lot of the cost, now covers less. What that means is then families have to make more of a financial decision than they ever have. I just read an article that talked about it is the cost that's driving the decision of where a student enrolls more now than ever before. But in addition, it's often driving the major that the student chooses. You know, I've seen a lot more students interested in business than ever before, because they can see a job when they get out. They want a return on investment. Studying the classics, maybe you can get a job, maybe you better go get a doctorate. Our number one academic program that students graduate in is psychology. I don't know what they do with that. But that is the number one. But we are seeing that as costs rise and people have to think about what am I going to do afterwards, and I may have to pay off loans, it's maybe driving students towards certain academic programs. We do know that students, this is important, that over your lifetime, having a college degree versus not having one will add $1 million to your earnings. That's kind of an average. It could be substantially more. That if you have a college degree, you'll have a better quality of life. You're more likely to vote. You'll have better health. You will be a happier person and be able to continue to learn the rest of your life. During the recession, students or young people who had college degrees were less likely to be laid off, and if laid off, were more likely to get their job back sooner. So having a college degree adds value. I'm amazed when I read articles about, well, you don't need to go to college, I didn't go to college, and look, that's not what the workforce is telling us. And that's the reason why there's this big push to get more people with degrees out there. The knowledge-based industry is continuing to increase, and you've got to have the knowledge to be successful in it. Education started with Socrates sitting under a tree with pupils asking questions. Lots of things are changing, but the basis of a teacher and a learner and knowledge being exchanged, that's not going to change. That's still going to be there. It may just be a little different than when I went to school, or perhaps parents when you went to school. I hope that maybe gave you a kind of a broad overview and some information and some tips, and I'm glad to take questions. And I love it if the students ask questions. I'm noted for getting your name and sending you something with the University of Georgia on if you ask a question. Okay, yes. I don't do it for parents, just for students, so. So the question was, how many AP or honors classes do we require for admission? None. A student may go to a school where none are available. And so we look at what the student has taken in light of the environment in which they are. So we have huge variety of institutions. Some will offer nothing, some will offer, how many APs do you have?
22.
22 APs. So for a student coming from Darlington to be successful at Georgia, we're going to expect them to have taken advantage of this. Now, I don't expect them to have 15 APs, but I think your average student's probably going to have 6 to 8 APs that comes to the University of Georgia. If the students that we've just admitted, they had on average about 8 APs. That's the higher group. It will come down to probably 4 to 6 by the time, but that's just the average of everybody that we admitted. It's not a minimum number that we're going to look at. Does that answer the question?
What about SAT?
SAT? We're going to rank that. Remember I said we're going to break it apart and we're going to rank it relative to the GPA. So there's not a minimum that'll get you admitted. Excuse me just a moment. See, you say SAT and I get all choked up. I think the enrolled students this past fall had a mean of a 1280 on the critical reading and math and a 627 on the writing.
That was the average.
That was the average of the students who enrolled. If you look at who was admitted, it's going to be higher because everybody we admit has lots of options, and so it comes down a little bit. All this is on our website under something called Fast Facts. I always encourage folks to look at that. And we will talk about the mid 50% range, which is where 50% of the students fell, 25% above and 25% below. And it's much better to look at that range if you're trying to get an idea of, should I apply to Georgia, is it a stretch or not? Look at it and you may be real high on the SAT and low on the GPA, remembering that we put those together in a formula. Good question. Yes? Is the AP weighted the same as honors? I don't I don't know particularly what you do on your transcripts here. If you don't weight it at all, when we calculate the grade point average, we only weight AP and IB because they have assessments at the end. There's no definition of what honors is across the world. There is for AP and IB. And we will give a half-letter grade weight if you don't already weight it on your transcript. So that means, let's say that your 2-semester course and you've got a B and a B, we would treat it as an A and a B. We would give it a half letter, and the way we can do it is take one half of them up. Did that? Good. When we look at students, what do I call a well? You're a student, right?
Yes, ma'am.
What year are you?
I'm a 9th grader.
A 9th grader. You make sure I get your name and address because I will send you something. First student to ask a question. Way to go. What do we look for with a well-rounded student? It's hard. And I want to point out something about competitive admissions. You can control certain things. You can choose the hard classes. You can do well in it. You can prep yourself for the assessment, get a good night's sleep, don't get in too anxious, take your snack, whatever it takes. You can submit the application on time, follow up with, those are all things you can control. What you cannot control is how many other students are applying, how strong they are, and how many seats we've got in the freshman class. All those things are going to determine how we look at you. So I can tell you there are some years I can look at applicants and say, 2 years ago, this was a shoo-in. This year it's not because we have more applicants or they're stronger. So when we're looking, what do we look for a well-rounded student? Lots of different things, and you don't have them all. And that's, you know, so there are lots of things that you may have, things you may not. If you tell me you want to study X, what have you done to tell yourself that that's a good match for you? I'm interested in pre-med and I want to study genetics, okay? Oh, I spent one summer shadowing with a doctor. I got some experience. I got some exposure. I know I like it. I'm interested in pre-vet. I want to go to the College of Agriculture and Environmental Science School and take animal health and hopefully then go to veterinary school. Oh, I volunteer at the Humane Society. So it's seeing some focus and some experience behind what you want to do academically. Things I don't like are the student who joins one club every year for a year. I don't see any depth in there. It's okay to try something out and not like it. Or the student who fills their application with, one Saturday a semester I do this, and every year I'm marking that. Or I help out every year at Christmas for this one event. I'd rather you kind of group that together because that's all good community service, but I want to see more depth and breadth in what you're doing outside of school. It's okay if you're working or you have commitments that keep you from doing school activities, that's okay, explain it. We're looking for good grade trends, so it's more bothersome if the grades are going down than if they're going up over time. If you've had a problem with a class, explain it. One of the worst things I find is when I'm reading a file and I see a good student, good solid A's, a few B's here and there, and a D in the 10th grade. Now, why'd they have that D in geometry in the 10th grade? The student never told me. The counselor never told me. The teacher never told me. Were they sick? Did they drop out of the class? Did they have a substitute come in and the whole class did poorly? When we look at an application, it's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle, and there's nothing worse than finishing and there's a piece missing, and that's what it is. So explaining things helps. If you've got a passion, you play the oboe, and you've got a passion for it, talk about it. Tell us about it. If you're asking a teacher to write a recommendation for you, give them a copy of your resume. Tell them about yourself with a set of bullet points so that they can reinforce what you've said about yourself in the application. That helps us a great deal to affirm that, hey, she really is president of the Southeastern chapter of so-and-so and has traveled the world for a year on this program. You know, when someone says, you know, we're really proud of Nancy. She did this, this, and this. So help giving that. There's no one thing that I can tell you assures you get admitted. And I know you hear this from admission. We want you to be yourself. We want you to present your best self is really what we want you to do. If your passions are all academic, help us understand what your passions are. Most importantly, what are you going to bring to our campus? You've done great things here, but what are you going to bring and add to our campus? We know if you choose to come there, we're going to give you a great learning environment. We're going to give you a great co-curricular. But in return, what do you bring? So it's presenting yourself that way. Does that help? It's a good question. Thanks for asking it. Yes, ma'am. Would you mind asking again? I couldn't hear over the fan. What kind of extracurricular activities would give you an edge? Be a really, really good football player or basketball player or oboist. You'd want to contact, by the way, one of our faculty members in oboe so that they would really advocate for you. I used oboe for years as an example until the head of that department came and sat in my office and gave me a stack of papers and said, I want them all admitted. I've heard you do your talk. There is no one activity. I mean, other than, if you have a very special skill that my campus needs, sorry, I don't really follow our football team very closely, but if X player left and we have an opening in that and you have that skill, you're probably going to be admitted to the University of Georgia. That's not going to affect that many students. That's just a little handful. But mostly it's the activities that help you add value and develop to be a good person. When I read files, it's really exciting to see how active students are. And I know a lot of sports are probably required of your boarding students. Don't pretty much everybody, they have to do something. So you have some things. What have you done with it? Did you develop some leadership with it? Or have you progressed in leadership? Have you stuck with something? It's fun to read a story of a student who says, I was really never a very good runner, but I'm on the cross-country team, and I'm there for every meet and every practice, and I support the team, and I encourage them. I'm never going to be a good runner, but I enjoy being part of the team. So you can take something that's really not that strong and make it stronger by what you've done with it. There's no one activity that assures it. I mean, if I'm reading the file, I know what I did in school a long time ago, and you kind of look for someone who's done, oh, I did that. But you may have, Cindy may be reading it who was in the Red Coat Band, and she may be looking for people like her who are in the marching band. It's the reason why more than one person reads the file, because we look at them differently. No one activity. Yes, ma'am.
If I understand this correctly, the first tier of students admitted to the University of Georgia are the academic needs.
Right.
And those are the main things that counts with that group. And then when we're talking about extracurricular activities, maybe your story, your passion, and so forth, that comes in the competitive type group, correct?
No, you get an A on the test, yes. You got it. And so if we're doing early action, we're only looking to admit academically superior. We're not looking at those other activities. So if you are a student who wants us to notice the fact that you've been so involved or you've had this leadership or this opportunity, we're not going to notice that in early action, so you want to apply regular. Or if you're a student who has a good grade trend coming along and you want us to see your senior grades, don't apply early action. We don't have your senior grades. So there are folks who should really apply regular because they'll present themselves best. You had a question with that, I'm sure.
No, maybe the percentage of these, does it vary from year to year? And with applicants and the amount of applicants?
Yeah.
How many, the academically superior tier is admitted, and then how many students are left in the secondary year?
The way it worked last year, I'm going to give you some kind of gross numbers. We admitted about 7,200 students in early action based on academically superior. About another 2,200 in February, same criteria. So now we're up to 94. We admitted overall about 11,000. So most of them are on academics. Now, a lot of those holistic reads that got admitted were early action students who were deferred and then completed. In fact, what we find is of those who were deferred from early action and complete everything and stay active, about 50% of those typically get admitted. So being deferred is not denied, but of those who were deferred and didn't complete the application, 0 got admitted. So you can have at least a 50%, that's gross numbers, and that's 1 year, whether it's going to be that way every year. But we're not trying to just fill the class with early action. We want to make sure that we're reading and looking at activities and looking for those whole students that add value to the campus.
Probably time for one more.
One more question? I got a student. Sorry.
What if you're not totally sure what you want to do for your career? How do you choose what college you want?
If you're not certain what you want to do as a career, how do you choose a college? That's a great question. And you know, again, what I said was about a third of the students don't know what they want to study when they come to Georgia. And I think one reason why they choose the University of Georgia is because it has so many options, so that when they do make up their mind, the odds are we have that major. So if you're not certain what you want to study, you may want to think broadly in college. But I'm going to suggest you go to a website to explore a little bit about majors. And I'm going to, this is shameful, I'm going to promote the University of Georgia's website. But we developed this to help students figure out what they may want to study. If you go to UGA's admissions website, it's www.admissions, S on the N, .uga.edu. On the left-hand navigational bar, we're getting ready to put up a new website. So for the next few weeks, on the left-hand navigational bar, it says Majors at UGA. If you click on that, it's going to send you to a microsite. What's your favorite TV show? Friends. I don't know if this will work, but it has a search engine. It lists every major at UGA. You've seen the site. It lists every major we have at UGA and all the certificates and so forth. And you can put anything up in the search engine, and it's going to look for keywords. I'm gonna, because I don't know with Friends what it would come up with. It may come up with social work or sociology, psychology, something like that. Living arrangements, who knows? But let's say you put Game of Thrones in there. It keys off of current things. Game of Thrones, it'll pop up medieval studies. We have a certificate in medieval studies. It'll bring up anthropology, English, and a couple of others. You put bugs in there, you'll get up a pest management certificate. You'll get entomology. So it allows you to play with things. So let's say you like horses, and you put horses in there. It'll pop up with every major at Georgia that will have something to do with horse care or horse management. And then you can click on it, and it'll tell you a little bit about the major. It'll tell you, it may have a story about an amazing student in that program or a fantastic faculty member in that program. And it'll say, if you're interested in this, you may also be interested in. You know, kind of like when you go to Amazon and you order a book, it says you may, we do the same type of thing. So it'll kind of tree off and help you look at things. It's a great time to be thinking about it. And we send out our information about this to middle school students all the time because it's just a great way to start thinking about all the things you can study in education. Good question. I want to make sure I get your name too, okay? I think that's all the time we have. Thank you. You've been a wonderful audience.
Thank you, Nancy. And I suspect a number of you will be making appointments with Ivy Brewer and me and the other college advisors, several of whom are here, and we'll be glad to see you anytime. Thank you all for being here.